Bueno, muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos. En esta ocasión tenemos presente a Morah Riedl del Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Tucson y ella nos va a acompañar para esta sesión de Museos Hoy, una serie de charlas que se están haciendo en colaboración con el Consulado de Estados Unidos, parte del programa para estudiantes de preparatoria y como también una oportunidad para hablar del arte americano en estos momentos y qué está pasando con los museos hoy en día. Esta sesión va a ser en inglés. Les pido como indicación general solo mantener el micrófono apagado en caso de que haya otra indicación. Morah se los hará saber. Y si gustan mantener su cámara prendida, son más que bienvenidos, si no también pueden apagarla. So, Morah, I leave it to you. I hope we can get an excellent talk with you today. And everybody, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat and we can discuss them during the session or at the end.
Thanks. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kenya, for the introduction. It's really great to be here today. I think I'll start by sharing my screen and we'll get started with the presentation. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. Hello, my name is Morah Riedl. I'm the Curator of Community Engagement at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Tucson, Arizona. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. Our Tucson resides on the ancestral lands of the Tohono O'odham Nation. And this is an image of our museum as it looks today in black and white. We're housed in an old repurposed fire station. So as it was explained to me today, the point of this presentation is for you to take inspiration from an American contemporary art space or art figure or a contemporary art movement. And because of MOCA's interesting situation and place in history and time, I was able to kind of do all three. So I'm going to start off the presentation by giving a brief history of MOCA Tucson. Then I'm going to discuss an artist that was central to MOCA Tucson's founding and also happens to be a world-renowned artist. And talking about the artist, I'm going to speak a little bit on a contemporary art movement. So let's get started. Oh, can I go to the next one? Here we go. Okay, so MOCA Tucson's mission, what we are trying to do on a day-to-day basis and embody is to inspire new ways of thinking through the cultivation, exhibition, and interpretation of contemporary art. We do this through exhibitions, education, residency programs, and public programming. So our exhibitions are kind of unusual and fun. We don't have a collection. So we're what you call a Kunsthalle, which means a hall of art that just houses art. Because we don't have a collection, we seek out artists, contemporary artists from around the globe, and invite them and pay them to display their work within our walls. We also have 6 really amazing education programs that range from K through 12, kind of elementary age, all the way up through our lifelong learning programs. We have a program at an assisted living center, so we're really catering to all ages. And we also have a residency program. Because of our old fire station building, we're really fortunate to have showers and bathrooms and rooms in our museum. So we've turned that into a space where artists from around the world could come and live with us for 3 months at a time, and they have an apartment and a studio space. We also have public programming, which is my job. Our public programs are to draw in folks who, aren't typically coming to the museum. So how can we cater to communities in Tucson, Arizona, and beyond who usually don't engage with contemporary art. So I work a lot with the university and the community college. I work with a local group called Black Renaissance, and we do monthly events for the public. So I'd like to discuss briefly MOCA Tucson's history. We were established by artists, 3 artists in 1997, and it was an art collective called Hazmat in downtown Tucson. And it was in basically a garage that they turned into an art space. And shortly after, they applied for a 501c3 status, which is a nonprofit status, and we were able to obtain the name MOCA for MOCA Tucson. So Hazmat became MOCA Tucson and was there at this garage kind of museum until 2010, which is when we were able to move into this building. The fire station moved to a different part of downtown, and we swooped in and were really fortunate to move into this building. Here, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but here in these bay doors that you see where the fire trucks used to park, that's our great hall where we have large scale installations. And then above here, above the garage doors, we have the residency space that I spoke about earlier. It has a couple apartment rooms, a kitchen, a few showers, and that's where residents come to live with us. We have about 6 a year in pre-COVID time, and it's really exciting to have artists living in the space 24/7. Over to this side on the left here, we have on the first floor a MOCA shop where we exhibit local artists and artisans craft. And then we also have an eastern wing with more gallery space where we display video work and smaller scale work. And then up here on the top is our public education space and our K through 12 kind of education space. We noticed a need in the community. A lot of art programs were being cut at public schools. So we offer programs in our building, and then we also bring teaching artists to high schools so that the high school students aren't without an art program. And this brings us to the central figure that I spoke of before. This is an artist named Olivier Mossay. He resides in Tucson. He's considered one of MOCA's founders. He was central to MOCA getting its feet on the ground and becoming a reputable institution. And this is because of Olivier Mossay's place in the art world and kind of status in the art world. He's a really influential figure. He was born in Switzerland, spent time in an artist collective in Paris in the 1960s. By the 70s, he had moved into the New York art world. And then by the 90s, he had settled in Tucson, which is little old Tucson, where he actually is living now and has a studio and is still making work to this day. Olivier, I included a picture. He just had a retrospective at MOMCO in Geneva, Switzerland. So a retrospective is when a museum will display an artist's work over a large span of time, over their whole lifespan. So if you're all interested in his work and his style, which is what I'm going to get into next, I highly suggest you look it up, the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Geneva, and look up Olivier's retrospective if you'd like to learn more after this presentation. So I felt that I couldn't really discuss Olivier without first discussing minimalism, which is a really iconic movement in contemporary art. And it's a movement that I think some people find kind of unapproachable and cold and hard. And so it's one that I like to talk about, because I actually found that when I learned more about minimalism, it had the opposite effect on me. And it's something I'm really drawn to now that I kind of understand the history behind it. So to just give you a little bit of background, the way that contemporary art began to make sense to me within a historical framework is for centuries and for, all of human history, artwork was often a way to tell stories and explain narratives and convey the human experience. Now, in going into the 20th century, photography came to the forefront, film came to the forefront, and we had these kind of digital and soon digital mediums doing that storytelling job for artists. So contemporary art is really about artists coping with what is our place in visual culture now. So there was painterly abstraction for some time, and painterly abstraction is, you may know Jackson Pollock, or even Picasso, I would consider somewhat painterly abstraction. It's abstraction, but you can see the brush strokes. It tends to be very colorful. It tends to feel very emotional. And that was very popular for a few, a century to a decade, for decades long. And then post-painterly abstraction came about in about mid-century. I would say the 1920s on. We've kind of been in this post-painterly abstraction phase of what's next in the art world. And for some artists, they felt, let's experience humanity in a different way other than through brushstroke and through expressive color. And so minimalism came about. And I will say in the beginning, minimalist is a term that came later. A lot of the artists that I'm discussing today wouldn't want to be called a minimalist, because they, in fact, didn't see their work as being minimal at all. It's quite complicated to them, and that term was a little offensive. They like to be called objectness. So to think about minimalism a little bit deeper, we have two kinds. There's object-focused minimalism and there's experience-focused minimalism. So I've given two examples here. We have Donald Judd's Untitled box here. And Donald Judd really encapsulates object-focused minimalism. His idea of art was to think about form, to think about texture, to think about these objects that we're interacting with every day on a day-to-day basis, and to almost elevate them in order to exercise looking in a new framework. So he also was famous for not titling a lot of his work. That's a very contemporary thing, because again, it's not about narrative anymore. It's not about storytelling as much anymore. It's about experiencing. And they felt that titles were imposing preconceptions on artwork that should be very subjective. And another interesting tidbit about Donald Judd is he was one of the first artists of this century, of the 20th century, to have his work manufactured for him. So it's very opposite from something painterly where, you see a picture of an artist and he's covered head to toe in paint. Donald Judd and minimalists would have craftsmen manufacture. So they would come up with the idea in their head of what they wanted it to look like, the materials, the size, the shape, the weight, and then they would have someone manufacture it for them. So it's very objectness. They wanted to think about art instead of in pieces. Like when you look at, you know, a Renaissance painting, you can see all these different little narratives. Minimalism is about looking at something as one whole thing. And then for experience-based minimalism, I gave you an example by Robert Morris, his mirrored cubes. These cubes, you can see they're in a gallery space, but of course they're mirrors, and you see these reflecting, the reflecting walls and the floor and the ceiling. But if people were to come into that gallery space, you would have a completely different experience with the objects. And so that's what really makes the art, is not just the object itself, but the human contact, what happens to the object once a human is in front of it. So it's bodily, it's interactive, it still is quite human and deep in a way, but it's just not, you know, portraying humans or storytelling in a way. So a lot of minimalists felt that where painterly abstraction or art that kind of came before them was all illusion, and we were tricking the mind into thinking that you were seeing a real scene, but it's really an illusion. Whereas minimalist artwork is concrete, it's real, there's no illusion there, it's reality. So now that we have a little bit of background on minimalism, I'm going to take us back to Olivier. Olivier Mossay, as you can see, well, I forgot to point out the dates here. So Donald Judd and Robert Morris were working in the 60s in the States. And then Olivier, you know, was likewise working in similar mediums and with similar thoughts, but in Paris with this group BMPT. So here's Olivier there. Again, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but he's painting the little circle on the white canvas here. And then you see it again in this middle photo. You see his work on the top right, and then again at the bottom right photo, his work being displayed in New York in 1974. So for Olivier Mossay, between 1966 and 1974, he painted over 200 identical circles. They were about 3 centimeters around, usually on this canvas that was 100 centimeters on each side. And to him, that was perfect. And that's all that he felt he needed to express through his artwork. That was the perfect visual stimulation for him. And he did this, as I said, into the 70s. And the only reason he stopped and decided to explore different kinds of minimalist work is because he was becoming a cult favorite in the art world. And folks were starting to catch on to the fact that he was just painting the same thing again and again and again. And they were really intrigued by it. And things were starting to be published about him. And he said, I don't want to be known for one thing. And he ditched this idea of doing the circles. And he took up this, like his partner here, Buren, he took up painting stripes. And so if you go and look at his exhibition in Geneva that I mentioned previously, you'll see a lot of different styles of minimalism that he took up. But this is something that he was known best for during that time. And next I wanted to share with you what Olivier has been up to today. So as I said, he was working in Paris. He moved to the States and was in the New York art scene in the 70s, and then settled in Tucson. And he still is exhibiting his work worldwide. But this is a piece that he did for the Pima Community College campus here in Tucson on just this month, October 2nd. So I wanted to share this with you. We'll start here. So this piece is simply called Ice. It's ice blocks that were stacked on campus, and Olivier did this knowing full well that Tucson is still quite hot. We're in the Sonoran Desert, so it's still pretty hot in October. So the whole point of the piece was to be transformative, and the fact that you can have an art piece that disintegrates, and that's a part of the art, and there's nothing left. And that can be iconic for minimalists as well. They were actually, many of them were against the commodification of art. And so the idea that an art piece can just disintegrate and be nothing and not worth a dollar amount at the end is very intriguing to artists like Olivier. And so, yeah, these are just a few couple views of piece. All right, and I thought I would end on a question. I hope that's okay, Kenya, but I wanted to ask if the audience felt like Olivier's piece, Ice, was more object focused or experience focused minimalism. I don't know, are you guys allowed to put it in the chat maybe? Oh, I see.
I think it's more experience than the object.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an experience. Whoever said, I think it's both, I think you guys kind of all hit it on the nail. Sorry to give you a trick question, but I don't think there's really a right answer, because I think it could be both. Ice, the whole point of the ice sculpture is that it would melt, and so it's very object based. We're thinking about the material, we're thinking about how the material looks in this outdoor kind of setting. But it is quite human, the way that you interact with the piece as well, because as a human person walking through Tucson in October 2nd, knowing it's like 95 degrees, you feel the heat, and then you're able to physically see the heat, you know, and the ice being exposed to this heat. So I think it's, yeah, I agree that it's both experiential, and it could also be considered object focused, because it's the emphasis on the object, which is ice in this case. Great. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you. Yeah, so I kind of blew through that, but if anyone has any questions about MOCA Tucson, if you have any questions about Olivier, I encourage you to look him up. He's a really interesting figure, and there's plenty of more minimalist artwork out there to be experienced. So if this is something that interests you, I really encourage you to look into it more. And I hope that you can visit MOCA too. I would love, after I had my first meeting with Kenya, I was like, I would love for us to be able to do some type of field trip exchange where our education students are allowed to come to your museum, and vice versa. So in a post-COVID world, we'll consider that. Okay, so this is an outdoor installation. How are you guys managing? Oh, that's a good question. So MOCA Tucson, we were closed from March 16th up until this month. We just had an opening October 3rd, and how we're managing our COVID cautiousness is we actually have almost made it an outdoor museum. We open up all of the garage doors. We've limited the exhibition space to just be in the Great Hall. We also have hand sanitizing stations. We have one gallery attendant who stays behind plexi the whole time. And you can see the space where the fire trucks used to park, which is now our Great Hall. It's about 6,000 square feet, and we only let in about 35 people at a time. We have a great exhibition with 5 artists and 7 poets. It's called Working from Home, New Commissions from Tucson. It's all based on artists who have either lived in Tucson and were working in Tucson, and we commissioned them to create new work during quarantine. And now it's exhibited there in the Great Hall. So I hope you all are able to visit. There's a lot more, thank you. There's a lot more information on our website about working from home. You can see some of those photographs. And also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. I think that's what I update the most. And if you have any questions, I'm on the other end of everything. I'm kind of MOCA's eyes and ears. So you can always DM us on Instagram or message us, and I'll be right there to answer whatever questions you have. It's just MOCA Tucson. I'll put it in the chat there.
No sé si hay alguna otra pregunta por ahí, alguien que quiera mandarla por el chat en español o... Okay, there is another question. I don't know if you want to answer. How an artist is able to live there?
Yeah, so good question. We have our residency program. How it works is we put out a call for applications, and every year we get about almost 400 applications, and I have a panel that's a mix of artists, professors from the university, and MOCA staff, and we select 6 artists to come and live with us a year. So they live in this this area above the garage doors that you see here. Right up there is where the firefighters that used to occupy the building, they would have rooms to take naps in, and they would have showers, and they have a kitchen and a laundry. So everything was kind of already set up for us. And so we try to have 2 artists at a time for 3 months at a time. And they each have a bedroom, and they each have a studio, and then they share the kitchen. They share, the big shower space, and yeah, that's how we do the residency program.
I don't know. ¿Hay otra pregunta por ahí? Okay.
How do I envision the future? Okay. No, it's okay. I like the chat. This is good. So we have pivoted all of our education programs to be online. So the education program that I mentioned for high school students, we do that over Zoom with our teaching artists. We also have a LGBTIQ+ program that's intergenerational that we do over Zoom. Some of the programs that I lead are like public lectures with university professors or with artist talks. We do all of those over Zoom too. Now that the rates in Arizona, we're getting a little bit better. We've been thinking about how we can do events that are socially distanced. I don't know if you can tell from this image, but we have a large plaza outside the museum. And so we can set up chairs 6 feet apart and do public screenings. or do a poetry reading with one of the poets who is a part of this exhibition. So yeah, it's definitely difficult because I think everyone at this point in COVID is starting to get Zoom fatigue and is sick of being at their computers all day. So we're really trying to think of how we can safely have events. And I think part of that is just limiting capacity, only letting about 30 people in at a time and making sure that they're always 6 feet apart. And yeah, that's about it. We will have many online events. So stay tuned and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll be able to see online events, and at least you can attend those since we can't travel to see one another right now.
Okay, I think there is another question. They are asking, as a community curator, what is exactly the activities you do with the community, or what type of things are associated with your job?
That's a really good question. It changes on a day-to-day basis. So on a pre-COVID, we would have monthly events called Third Thursday, where the museum was open at nighttime and it was free to the public. And I would try to make those events geared towards different communities. So I teamed up with, in February for Black History Month, I teamed up with my friends at Black Renaissance. They're a local collective in Tucson that's Black musicians, artists, DJs, muralists, and we did a silent disco with them, and they came, and that was great. And we also I teamed up with Comic-Con. I feel that comic book artists are sometimes, they're contemporary artists too, and sometimes their craft isn't as respected in the art world. So I invited all the artists from Comic-Con to come have booths at MOCA Tucson for an event and display their comic book art and sell stickers. And oh, sorry. And yeah, those are just two examples. We also work with, like I said, the university quite often. So something we did that's actually virtual that you can go watch is MOCA's 5-minute film festival, where we invite any artist from Arizona who has film work that's under 5 minutes to be juried, and then it goes into our film festival. And we had to make that virtual this year because it was over the summer. So that's on our YouTube channel. So you can go watch it. It's about an hour long, and it's about 20 films of under 5 minutes long by Tucson artists, and they're really, really good. And it's a mix of there's some music videos, there's films with narrative, there are films that are more abstract. So it's kind of a mix of everything. So you can look that up. If you want to look it up in YouTube, it's just look up the Museum of Contemporary, typing it in here. Also on YouTube, we have a Juneteenth celebration. Juneteenth is a holiday in the States that celebrates when the last state abolished slavery and African Americans were actually free. Finally, and so that's on June 19th, and so we had a big virtual celebration featuring African American artists and designers and musicians in the area. And we don't have any virtual tours at the moment. Our exhibition is, it's just in the Great Hall, so it's all in one big space, and most of it you can kind of see through pictures. I can set it up. It's something that we can do by request for schools, but I don't have anything, readily available on YouTube as far as virtual tours go.
No sé si hay alguna última pregunta por ahí. If not, then I think, Morah, thank you so much for this afternoon. I think we all learned a lot about the MOCA in Tucson and about the minimalism and the foundation of your museum. So I think we took a lot from the project, and we hope to be talking to you soon. We hope the students get to pick different perspectives for their project. And I don't know if there is anything else somebody wants to say. I think we can say goodbye today. So thank you so much for this afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. It was so lovely talking with you all and taking your questions. And I wish you the best of luck on your art project. And again, feel free to reach out to us anytime if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Bueno, esto sería todo por hoy. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos.